Purple Robe here, and welcome to Chapter 3 of Madcap. If you made it to Chapter 3, I know you're enjoying yourself, so I'm just going to get out of the way and let you keep going.
Papa Bear entered his house, and boy was he pissed. The damn porridge was scalding hot, and the family had had to take a walk until it cooled down. They made it all the way to the lake when the friggin' baby had wet himself, and of course, Mama Bear hadn't brought an extra diaper, so he had to run all the way back to the house to get one. Now he was tired, sweating, and extremely hungry. Walking past the kitchen table, he noticed that his porridge bowl was empty. What the? Papa narrowed his eyes and scanned the house. Not only was his bowl empty, but his bottle of Jack Daniels, which had been set right next to his food, was nowhere in sight. After a moment, he rested his eyes on his favorite easy chair, the one beside the fireplace. There was the bottle resting on its arm. The bottle was as empty as the porridge bowl. Papa Bear began to fume. His face turned red, the corners of his lips angled sharply downward while his eyebrows pointed demonically inward. He saw a small, delicate, high-heeled shoe near the wall over by the staircase and decided it was evidence. He bent down to pick it up. When his sight crossed its companion, laying on its side halfway up the stairs. Papa Bear now realized that the perpetrator was still in the house. Holding the first shoe, he passed by the second one without stopping on his way upstairs. He paused in the hallway and sniffed the air. He checked the baby's room first, having completely forgotten why he'd come back home. Seeing nothing amiss in there, he crossed over to his own bedroom without getting a diaper for his son. He quietly pushed his door open and saw, laying spread eagle on her back, on his bed, a beautiful girl of no more than 16, with long curly blonde hair and smelling strongly of his missing liquor. "Well, well, well, what do we have here?" asked Papa Bear in a loud voice, hoping to startle the young girl awake. It didn't work, though. She just moaned and rolled over onto her side. Papa Bear was furious. She had obviously eaten all his porridge, sat in his favorite easy chair while downing his whole bottle of JD, and then passed out cold on his bed. He was about to grab her by the scruff of her neck and toss her out the front door when he suddenly stopped to think for a moment. There was a young, highly attractive blonde on his bed who could probably sleep through a nuclear explosion. And Papa Bear was terribly horny. His mind grasped a wonderful idea. Clothing began to fly about the room. The sex fest began. "Hey, aren't you done with that yet?" asked Binky, rather annoyed. The film he was watching was a new show called Goldilocks. It was finally getting to the good parts, and he desired a little privacy. The maid, whose name was Molly, knelt above the mess, frozen, with a partially shocked, partially curious expression on her face. She had begun her task of cleaning up the busted television monitor with the express purpose of having it done quickly so she could return to Curtsy's party in time to play strip croquet. At the last party, she actually caught a glimpse of Gordex Pritchard's cute little butt before he was able to win a shirt by knocking her own ball. He had wrapped her top around himself, covering his thong underwear. When she finally got it back at the end of the evening, she was the envy of her high school class. She lent the shirt out to her two best friends to sniff and fondle for weeks. Now, as she looked past the guy at the computer and focused on his TV set, she was seeing another guy's butt, as well as his more private parts, and she was seeing them in action. This was better than any of Curtsy's parties. Almost," she stammered, returning to her task at hand. Actually, it was at her feet. She figured he must have dropped the set from a pretty good height for it to have shattered into this many pieces. She swept a few more shards of glass and electronic chunks into her dustbin. Binky eyed her for a moment longer, not even noticing as her skimpy French maid's outfit rode up on her, exposing long, slim legs. She was interfering with his business at hand, or the business of his hand, or whatever. He just wanted her to leave. Molly had put the larger bits into one garbage bag already, and was now emptying the smaller ones from her dustpan into another black plastic bag. She then placed both on the teleporter and told Binky, who she referred to as Mr. Turpin, that he could send them away. Binky paused the film while he swiveled his chair around to type the commands which would dispose of the trash. After that was done, he waited for Molly to step onto the teleporter herself, so he could be rid of her and get back to Goldilocks. As she walked by him, he finally noticed the outfit. Molly wasn't the most attractive girl in her school. That honor belonged to Curtsy Pooble. But she was a 17-year-old cheerleader, or so she had said, and Binky hadn't seen a real live woman since the end of the party he had thrown when he had first started his job. In fact, when he had asked for a maid to clean up the broken set, he had guessed that they would send a couple of trash bags and a vacuum. When the girl had shown up, he had been so surprised that he thought she must be a robot. However, she had mentioned something about a party she wanted to get back to, and if you remembered the outside world correctly, robots didn't party. When they were not being used, they just kind of hung out in a closet or something until you turned them on again. The maid was obviously a real human, and Binky had almost let her escape without thinking. "Wait a minute," said Binky almost suspiciously. "Is there a problem?" asked Molly, looking back at the floor that she had just swept. "Do you need me to do something else?" She hoped not. The party was waiting. It was true that Gordex Pritchard was now dating Curtsy, but she had said that Barbar Mulligan was going to be there tonight. Molly thought that he was really sweet as well as cute, and Curtsy said he was a totally inept croquet player. She'd see his butt in no time. "Actually, yeah," he grinned slyly. "If you wouldn't mind." He gave her an appraising once-over and licked his lips. What do you want?" It was now obvious to her, and she would have none of it. "Well," he let the word roll off his tongue, not knowing exactly how to proceed. It had been almost 4 years since he had put the moves on a woman, so he was a little out of practice. Besides, Binky wasn't what you'd call a real ladies' man. It was well known around his neighborhood that he wasn't very bright, and it gave him a certain big friendly dog sort of charm. However, he had never actually picked up a girl as much as one might just end up with him when the bar closed, and she was really blitzed. Binky had always thought it was his own talents that had got him laid on those occasions, but as we've said now a few times, Binky is perceptually challenged. Before he could look too stupid, Molly cut in, pointing a finger at the computer, happy to help him change the subject. "Hey, you just got a message on your computer." Binky swiveled back around in his chair. Yes, there was another message on the monitor, or more precisely, it was the first message, repeated. Binky frowned for a moment before returning his limited attention back to Molly. "Yeah, it's nothing. It's just the same as before." "What do those letters and numbers mean?" "Oh, they're just—" Actually, Binky had no idea what they meant, but he thought fast and came up with, "It's just technical computer stuff, you know, way over your head." "It says there's been a gap in reality," she replied with a slight edge in her voice. Suddenly, understanding dawned on Molly's young features. "Hey, you're the guy that monitors the RC-2000. We just learned about you in science class." "That's me," he beamed. "They're paying me a ton of money, and all my living expenses are taken care of for 4 years," he added quickly. "You impressed?" Molly wasn't really paying attention. She had walked over to the computer and was checking out the keypad. "If there was a reality gap, shouldn't you fix it? Aren't they sort of dangerous or something? I mean, couldn't almost anything come through one of them?" She suddenly became frightened and wished she could just finish up her cleaning duties and get back to the party. Binky thought back on the kind of things that came through reality gaps. He laughed to himself and said, "Nah, there was a gap all right, but it's gone now." "Yeah, right. Okay, can I go now?" She slowly edged back to the teleporter. He sensed that he was losing her. "It was right over there," he pointed at the monitor. "There's nothing there now, see? You cleaned up all the sand. All gone." "Sand? What sand?" Molly asked with a perplexed look on her face. "I thought that was glass from the TV set that broke." Ha! Binky thought. He had slickly maneuvered her off the subject of leaving. He quickly dove in headfirst into what he hoped would be a good explanation. "Well, that's why the TV broke, because the reality gap came and knocked it off the computer monitor." He saw the blank expression on her face. It sort of reminded him of the faces of the drunken women he often went home with from bars, so he decided to plunge forward. "See, the gap made the monitor all big and stretchy and brown, and then he pushed a little knob out that became a door handle, and then the handle turned, and the door opened because, well, you know, that's what doors do. It's kind of like cauldrons, always boiling and bubbling." "Huh?" Molly was lost. Yeah, and then when the door opened, there was a guy standing there screaming, and the sand flying in, the sun was really bright." Binky was swinging his hands to and fro in elaborate gestures designed to enhance his story. He was really getting into it. "And I think I screamed back because, I was pretty startled. And that must have scared the guy in the doorway because he slammed the door shut." Binky punctuated the last statement by pretending to slam an invisible door and ended up smacking himself in the jaw with his shoulder. "Oh," he said lamely.
When the door shut again, everything was back to normal and it looked like it did when you first got her.
He paused and took a breath.
See? Nothing to be worried about.
Whatever. Yeah, it's one word, but she inflected it by putting a space in between there. With as much attitude as she could muster, she said, "Look, I'm Molly. I'm a high school cheerleader who does part-time work as a maid. I've got a party I need to get to, so I am out of here." "Could you just teleport me home?" she ended meekly. Binky sighed. He had definitely lost her, and after expending all that energy, he was a little depressed.
Fine. Get back on the platform.
She did, realizing that she had hurt his feelings by reacting to his story as she had. She was starting to get those big puppy dog feelings toward him that most women did. She waited while he swiveled back to the teleporter control pad, thinking of something to say to make him feel better. "Did you call your supervisor?" she asked quietly, trying to sound friendly.
I don't have one, Binky said rather melodramatically. I'm here all alone.
"Well, surely there must be someone you're supposed to call when there's a problem."
I told you! Binky became defensive. There's no problem. The gap's gone. See? He pointed back at the monitor. No gap. All gone. Gap go bye-bye.
"Yeah," she began slowly, attempting to twist her words to extract the information from Binky that she wanted, without jabbing at his already smarting emotions. "But if there was a gap somewhere, and it didn't go away—" Binky rolled his eyes. "Hypothetically, of course."
What does that mean? Asked Binky.
It means that it's not actually happening. We're just imagining it." Molly held her hands out before her, non-threateningly, as a peace gesture in an attempt to calm him. She spoke very slowly. "Do you understand, Mr. Turpin?"
Yeah, I think so,
he sulked, still thinking that she was accusing him of some wrongdoing. "So, if there was a gap, which I'm sure there's not, and if there was, it definitely wouldn't be your fault, who would you call?"
I told you, Binky started in a huff. There's no one but me to take care of things. It was on the letter when I got here.
Aha, thought Molly. Now we're making headway. She stepped off the platform toward Binky, who cringed away. She proceeded with less haste, and ended up seated on the desk beside him. "Who wrote you the letter?"
I don't know.
Okay, that's discouraging, but she wasn't ready to give up quite yet. In fact, this was turning into an interesting puzzle to her, and she loved solving good mysteries. "All right, then. Who hired you?" was her next question.
Oh, some guy,
said Binky, happy to be on more familiar ground.
He's really connected. My Uncle Bertram knows him. He got my sister a job at the core government building. Top security level, he whispered confidingly. And she's an idiot.
Uh-huh, Molly nodded. "And have you met anyone at all who also works here, who is in any way connected to your job?"
Nope. Uncle Bertram told me I got the job, and then he gave me the coordinates to punch in the next day. I teleported here at 7 a.m., and I've been here ever since.
Binky shrugged and sighed. Molly collated the information she'd been given so far. Mr. Turpin, who was obviously a moron, had gotten the position through the influence of his uncle. He had not met anyone involved in his work in 4 years he'd been here, or so he said. He had a computer and a teleporter that sent him everything he needed. Aha! Couldn't you ask for help from the computer?
I guess.
Binky stared at her a little quizzically. After a moment, Molly realized that Binky was going to be of no more help, so she went to the computer herself and typed out a message.
Hey, what are you doing? Asked Binky, suddenly distraught. This is my job. You can't do that.
But it was already done. Molly had asked the computer if there was a current reality gap. The monitor hummed for only the briefest bit of time and then flashed an answer. "Isn't that obvious by my last 2 messages? ? Molly and Binky regarded the display a moment, then glanced at each other. Finally, back to the monitor. Molly gave a heavy, thoughtful sigh. She tapped her fingers lightly on the keyboard, almost started to say something, quickly shut her mouth. She was at a loss. Binky watched the young girl doubtfully. He'd never actually asked the computer a question. In fact, he'd never even touched it before. Whenever he needed anything, he used the teleporter computer. Finally, Molly said something. "Where's that letter you say you got, Mr. Turpin?"
That was Chapter 3 of Madcap. Hope you enjoyed it. That was Chapter 3 of Madcap. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. You know the drill. All that stuff really does help me, believe it or not. The YouTube algorithm and all that stuff. And if you want to go past the first 5 chapters, which I have here on YouTube,